Hello everyone, welcome back to the Tournament Centre. Rich Hagan joined by Ian Duke from Inside R&D, and together we're going to explore the world of the Magic Online Draft Archetypes. 5 colour pairs today and 5 colour pairs tomorrow. And Ian, we've decided to go with the ally colour pairs today.
That's right.
All right, so let's get to it then. So we tossed a coin. In fact, we did lots of coin flips. How very democratic of us. And we begin with white-blue. Tempo flies. So what's going on in the world of white-blue, Ian?
Yeah, so the white-blue deck, thematically, we sometimes call it the Awaken deck. In Battle for Zendikar, it had a bunch of Awaken cards animating your lands. With Oath of the Gatewatch, it sort of transitioned a little bit more toward like a Walls and Flyers, kind of a classic blue-white archetype here. And mainly you're just looking for good cards, defensive cards to hold down the ground, and then Flyers to go over the top in the air.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting that because the Awaken cards only exist in one pack now, in some ways they've actually gone up in value because less people are running around waiting to tempo them back to your hand or on top of the deck. And so often the Awaken cards, if you can make them stick, they are super powerful now.
Yeah, and there's actually a couple super powerful pseudo-Awaken cards, I like to think of them in Oath of the Gatewatch, and we'll talk about those in just a moment.
All right, let's do that. So why don't we look at the top commons then in Oath of the Gatewatch, and we should do the legalese down at the bottom there. These are the most frequently first through fifth picked commons among draft winners on Magic Online. So you're looking at what goes in to the best 3-0 decks on Magic Online. What stands out to you here, Ian, on the commons?
So Isolation Zone, I think, is just the top white common in any deck. It's a particularly good fit here, just a catch-all removal spell that can take care of a huge ground pounder or an enemy flyer. Really great fit for a defensive white-blue tempo Flyers deck. Next up is Jawar Isle Avenger. Even though this card has Surge, don't let that mislead you. It's just a fine card in any deck. 3/3 flyer for 5 is just great. Sometimes you surge it, you don't need to go out of your head, it's just added value on top.
I want to ask you about Isolation Zone. This is a set with 6 types of mana. I'm reluctant to say 6 colors, but there are very definitely white, blue, black, red, green, and colorless. Were you very cautious in putting, because Isolation Zone's a very high pick, it's often a pick 1, it's double white. That presents a real conundrum for players, whether they're willing to commit to double white straight out of the gates. Is there a sense of the set as a whole that you kind of downplayed the double color, or did you actively want to make people think about that?
Great question. So we did think a lot about double color costs and which colors they should go in and at what rarities and on which cards. For white in particular, white is the color that's least associated with the Eldrazi in both sets.
Right.
And it's the color that's least likely to make use of C mana, colorless mana. With the notable exception of Eldrazi Displacer at rare. That's really the only devoid white card that uses colorless mana. So with said, we look to trim out the double colored costs in all the rest of the colors that did use more colorless mana, especially blue and black. But white, we actually emphasized it a little bit here by putting it on the top common.
That's
to kind of direct
smart.
Players like, you don't need colorless mana in your white deck. That's not what white is about.
Yeah, I like that a lot. That's great stuff. All right, let's look at the top uncommons that you've been picking on Magic Online for white-blue. Here they are: Reflector Mage, Immolating Glare, Cyclone Sire, Relief Captain, and the Wall of Resurgence.
Yeah, so Reflector Mage, this is your signpost uncommon, as we call them. Each color pair has a really powerful 2-colored, multicolor uncommon. Reflector Mage is no exception here. This is a card that's been making waves in Constructed, and it's certainly really powerful and limited as well. After that, Immolating Glare, a perfect defensive tool, killing off attacking creatures at a really efficient rate, so great for a deck that wants to defend the ground and go over the top with Flyers. And then, speaking of Flyers, Cyclone Sire, this is one of those pseudo-Awaken cards that we talked about last time. So a great rate on this card, a 5-mana 3/4 flyer. When it dies, you get even more value animating your land, and if you have Awaken cards from Battle for Zendikar, you can actually stack up the counters on one land and go tall with it.
Yeah, I like Cyclone Sire a lot. So now, what about combining the commons and uncommons, not just from Oath of the Gatewatch, but ultimately there's a pack 3 in the draft as well. That, of course, is Battle for Zendikar. So let's take a look now at how that combines for white and blue. So your BFZ commons, you've got Sky Spawner, Clutch, Reproach, Griffin. Shiro, I'm a little surprised to see Courier Griffin there, because that was a fairly ordinary card in Battle for Zendikar, and I guess that speaks in a way to the way that the synergies within BFZ have weakened significantly now, and so some of them, to the point where just this little package of a 2/3 flyer with a little bit of life gain is actually pretty valuable.
Yeah, I think one of the other issues here, Rich, is just as you add a new set, the details of the numbers kind of shift around a little bit, and in particular, mana curves shift. So one thing we've seen is a lot of the top commons and uncommons in Oath of the Gatewatch for white-blue are 5 mana cards: Jawar, Isle Avenger, Cyclone Sire, Expedition Raptor, and so on. And so filling in the curve at 4 there is a little bit more valuable. So just one of the interesting things as you add another set.
All right, so we'll keep blue. Let's take white away, let's add black. Let's look at the top commons. And here, there is what blue-black is doing. Evasive colorless, Ian.
Yeah, so blue-black is like the premier colorless deck. If you're interested in using colorless mana, these are the 2 colors that use it the best. They have the highest density of cards that want colorless mana, and in many cases, the most powerful cards to make use of colorless mana here. In particular, a lot of those cards are evasive and can use their colorless mana either to give other creatures flying or get through unblockable damage of sorts.
All right, so let's start off with the commons then. What do we see coming our way? We've got Oblivion Strike, Blinding Drone. And Blinding Drone's a really interesting card.
Yes.
A lot of people trying to work out, because it's just blue in its mana cost, but you absolutely have to have colorless to make it activate. And what I love about that card most is the way that you've arranged it so that essentially it only can go in this one deck. Almost no one else at the table can ever want a Blinding Drone, and it's a really key component of the blue-black deck.
Yeah, this card was positioned intentionally to be one of the main allures to drafting colorless along with your blue cards. Sort of positioned right at that level where it's like, just generous enough to go like, hey, maybe I should move into colorless. And it's meant to be one of those sort of signposts in the draft where if you see those Blinding Drones coming a little bit later, maybe pick 4 or 5-ish, you can conclude that, hey, blue is open, I should jump into that and start picking up some colorless mana.
All right, let's go to the uncommons then in Oath of the Gatewatch for blue-black. What have we got? So we begin, and there's a shock. It's the Signpost uncommon. Once again, you've got Mind Melter there, Grasp of Darkness, reprint, Essence Depleter is a card I love, Thought Harvester, Cyclone Sire we've already talked about.
So Mind Melter really captures what the deck is all about, chipping through for unblockable damage with evasive creatures, and then it's got this colorless activation for added value. But even if you haven't drawn your colorless mana yet, it's just a solid creature. It's essentially a Phantom Warrior there. So yeah, just a great card to add to the deck.
All right, so how does Battle for Zendikar tie in with the new blue-black decks? Let's take a look.
Yeah, a Clutch of Currents, Eldrazi Sky Spawner, Complete Disregard, just some of the top commons. Great fits here as well. You'll see that the Ingest and Process cards go down a little bit in value. So Benthic Infiltrator, still decent here. Still helps you, turn on your Process if you get 1 pack of that. And gets through for some incidental damage, but not as essential of a card as it was before. And then just going through Ruination Guide, Grip of Desolation, solid cards here back again.
Absolutely. All right, so that's blue and black. This time we'll keep hold of the black cards and see what happens once you pair black with red. Now, what is black-red trying to do? And this is one of the color pairs where really we are trying to do more or less the same thing as we've been doing for the last few months.
Yep, black-red has mostly stayed on track. It's a very focused deck in both sets, centered around devoid synergies, so keying off of casting colorless spells and having colorless creatures, and it's a very, very aggressive deck.
It certainly is. Why don't we take a look at the top commons then? So Oblivion Strike, removal, Reality Hemorrhage, removal, Boulder Salvo, removal, Kozilek Shrieker and Zada's Commando, well, they're more about the activations going on. Although Zada's Commando, actually, sort of hidden underneath that cohort ability of dealing 1 damage to the opponent, First Strike turns out to be a really big deal at the moment for Zada's Commando.
It is for sure. Just an excellent aggressive creature, whether or not you have the ally synergies. I see a lot of these black-red aggressive decks sprinkle in a few allies along the way, but it doesn't have to be a major focus for your deck for that card to be great.
Let's move into the uncommons then, in this particular color pair. Black-red, Flare Drone, once again, the Signpost uncommon, a card I just love playing with. Embodiment of Fury is there, removal with Devour and Grasp. And it's worth reminding people, because of course some people haven't played a lot of this format yet, they don't always get to play many hours on Magic Online and so on. Essence Depleter is a card that once you get to the late game, because it reads as a 1-point drain life. That's what it says on the card. But once you get to the point where you're at 6 mana or even 9, which is doable in these decks that are playing Warden of Geometries and are playing Hedron Crawler, so you get to 7 land plus a couple of colorless sources, suddenly you're draining people for 3 at end of turn. Essence Depleter is filthy.
Yeah, that's a big game for sure. One of the things we tried to do with the black-red deck is add some colorless mana activations to sort of support your aggressive strategy, where if you're stalled out and unable to attack, say your opponent has a bunch of defensive creatures with high toughness, the colorless activations are what help you punch through for those last points of damage.
All right, so what about Battle for Zendikar? How does that tie in the black-red archetype? We're thinking there's going to be plenty of synergy here, and, well, look, the commons, Touch of the Void, Nettle Drone, Complete Disregard, Outnumber, and Sludge Crawler, they were all good first time around. They're still all good right now. What about the uncommons, Ian?
Vile Aggregate, this was one of the top uncommons for red in Battle for Zendikar. It's also great here, as you mentioned before, Rich. This is one of the archetypes that has stayed on track, and so that card is still awesome. Forerunner of Slaughter, Grip of Desolation, another card that was great in Battle for Zendikar, still great here, still triggers your colorless. Skitterskin, I think, is a card that's actually picked up a little bit with Oath of the Gatewatch, able to regenerate if you control another colorless creature.
Now, I want to ask you about what is a reprint from a long time ago, Rolling Thunder, because that's the kind of card that if you're trying to get a handle on the new format, it's really useful. Cards like that can be a real good bellwether of, you know, what does the table look like typically? So from your point of view, does Rolling Thunder now hoover up more than it used to 3 months ago? Are we at the point now where it's actually got less exciting and it's more like a 6 mana red 4 reach out and deal 4 damage to one creature kind of spell? Where does Rolling Thunder sit in this new format?
I think it's pretty similar to where it was before. We are seeing more multicolor decks with Oath of the Gatewatch because the mana fixing is a little bit stronger. That said, Rolling Thunder is still a double red card, still really need to be a dedicated red drafter to get it. But if you are, it's, as always, just as awesome as it has been.
Okay. Now, Louis Scott Vargas, had a little chat with him just before we started here with you, and chatting with him, if he's not telling jokes, things are actually going very well. I said, how was the draft? He went, my draft deck is very good. Done. And he is in great shape. And the reason I mention it now, he is, of course, red-green. So let's take a look at that pair up now. Let's show you what red-green is trying to do here as our next pair. And this time around, Ian, lands matter mid-range, which is not quite the same as landfall. So talk about what red-green's doing this time around.
Yeah, so, you know, landfall was a strong theme in Battle for Zendikar. There is less total landfall in Oath of the Gatewatch, although there are a couple notable uncommons, especially Embodiment of Fury, that have landfall in Oath of the Gatewatch. So it's still very much an aggressive beatdown deck, but it's not low to the ground. I'm going to play a bunch of little weenie creatures. They're sort of more beefier mid-speed threats, but they're aggressive in nature.
Right, I'm pretty confident we're going to see a Relentless Hunter sometime quite soon. But let's begin with the commons, as we always do. Remember, this is what you are picking in your Magic Online winning draft decks. Let's look at the commons here in the red-green archetype. We've got Reality Hemorrhage, there's Boulder Salvo, Zadus Commando again, and I'm quite intrigued by that green card on the right, because yes, it's got Vigilance, yes, it's got Trample, but it's a fairly ordinary card fundamentally. It's not, it isn't, as we say, pushed especially hard, but it really is a sort of linchpin of the near top end of this archetype.
Yeah, Tajuru Pathwarden looks simple and unassuming, but it's got a lot of things going for it. Trample is huge here, just being able to trample over Scion tokens, combines really well with combat tricks, which has always been a hallmark of red-green aggressive decks. And notably also, Rich, it's an ally. So as you combine it, sprinkling in things like Zada's Commando, it can just give you a little bit of extra value end of turn there. So it's a card that does a lot of work, and I'm not surprised to see it as the top green common here for this archetype.
All right, well, let's move on to the top uncommons then. And as I mentioned, there's Relentless Hunter right up the top. I love that card. Just great that, you know, as barring super corner cases, as soon as you make it, you can look forward to untapping and knowing it's switched on as a potential 4/4 trampler. Really nice design.
Yeah, it's just a great card on rate. Doesn't really ask a lot of you. It's just like, hey, I'm just going to beat down and be really effective at it. And that's just what
you know what you did last turn? Well, do it again this turn and I'll be bigger.
Yep.
Yeah. And Seed Guardian also. Now that card is tremendous.
Yeah, it's a great card. Again, does a lot of work, has a lot of different things going for it. Really good defense against the flying creatures in the format, just the 3/4 body, really well positioned there. And of course, you get value even when it dies. So it's a great card to rumble with.
I think a lot of people have a good sense of designing big splashy mythic rares or rares, and I also think people understand that commons are not meant to be splashy because there are so many of them, and that is the meat and potatoes of the format. What is the trick to designing the fun and the cool uncommons, which sort of seem to straddle those two?
There's a couple different ways to go about it. One is looking at what your color pairs are doing and what the synergies are in the format and trying to give you exciting reward cards to play those up. Another angle to look at is where are the holes in the format, right? What are certain colors missing? With Sea Guardian in particular, I realized early on in the format that we were missing reach creatures, that green was a little bit too vulnerable to attacks in the air, so I wanted to add that there. And it was also missing a little bit of synergy for the black-green decks, actually, playing into the Graveyard Matters and the sacrifice themes there. So that's a card that's kind of doing double duty, shoring up some weaknesses and giving you some payoff.
All right, so what about once we put Battle for Zendikar back in the mix, let's take a look at the commons and uncommons from Battle for Zendikar going in. And the top commons, Touch of the Void, Outnumber, Snapping Gnarlid, McKinley Siderunner, nice 2 drops there, and Valakut Predator at 3. Once you hit the uncommons, Rolling Thunder again, no surprise there. Tajiri Warcaller equally. And I suppose the slight surprise therein is the willingness to be the double green. But of course, by the time you get to BFZ in this draft format, you're well established in green. You're not taking the punt on the double green.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, as players figured out over time in the Battle for Zendikar format, green ended up being one of the weaker colors. With Oath of the Gatewatch, I think green is much more in line with the other colors there. And so often you'll find yourself coming out of the 2 Oath packs with a solid green base in your deck, and now all of those powerful green uncommons that you unfortunately shied away from in triple Battle for Zendikar because the rest of the cards weren't as good, now those cards really shine and you're eager to pick them up for your already green deck.
Well, if we're looking at green cards, let's see how green has gone up in value, because there's a pretty exciting draft archetype coming up now. It's green-white, go wide support in.
Yeah, this was one of my favorites internally. It's just a really basic attack deck, leveraging the support mechanic. Well, all you want to do is get really good small creatures into play, preferably with keyword abilities like First Strike or Flying, and then just support lots of +1/+1 counters onto them.
I think it's possible that Munda's Vanguard, the rare we saw there, that was probably the #1 card at Grand Prix Vancouver last weekend. Matt Costa had 2 in his sealed deck on day 1.
Oh, wow.
And it just felt like, you know, it's easy to say, oh yes, your 6/8 for 7 mythic rare or rare is going to have a target on it, but this was a 3/3 that 100% of the time needed to be killed. You know, the threat for that is a great card. Let's look at the top commons, because you're not always going to be able to draft a Muna's Vanguard, but you are going to be able to draft this lot. So what do we see here?
Yeah, so again, Isolation Zone, top common, we talked about before. Ondu War Cleric, just a great early creature that maintains its utility later on to the game with the cohort ability. Expedition Raptor is really sort of a staple of this archetype, as is Saddleback Lagak. These are the 2 sort of premier support creatures in each of those colors. And these are kind of the meat and potatoes of your deck. You want to get lots of early drops into your deck to come out before you hit your 4 and 5 mana, and then just curve right into the Saddleback Lagak and Expedition Raptor, pump them up. It's sort of like, they're sort of like big creatures that have half haste in a way, because they share their +1/+1 counters onto other creatures, which can then attack that very same turn.
I hadn't thought of it like that, half haste. That's cool. All right, let's take a look at the top uncommons then for you and show you what we've got. Well, it's Jiraga Auxiliary. Again, you see the pattern, the signpost uncommon for you in the 2 colors, rewarding you in pack 2 for being in those colors already, or rewarding you in pack 1 for choosing those bright and early. Relief Captain, terrific card. Seed Guardian, we've already mentioned. Nissa's Judgment, a lot of people value that very highly, but to start with, they didn't. As R&D, do you like it when players get cards wrong to start with? Do you want them to take several weeks before things settle into, if you like, the truth about them?
Great question. The answer is yes, but not too much.
Okay.
One of the balances you have to strike in game design is leaving room for players to learn over time and realize that their initial predictions and evaluations weren't exactly correct, and sort of the learning process is a large part of what's fun about games. That said, if you make the cards too hard to evaluate and totally, counterintuitive, players will just bounce off it right away and be like, hey, this isn't for me, I just don't get it. So you want to get that right mix of like, this is comfortable, I'm used to this, I sort of get it, but there's enough to learn over time that you feel like you're kind of leveling up as you play the format more.
Fantastic stuff. All right, so now Battle for Zendikar. Let's put that into the mix here with green-white. What are you picking in your winning pack 3s in Magic Online?
Gideon's Reproach and Teardrop, just great removal spells as usual. Core Castigator picks up a little bit as just an early drop that's great to support onto. Same thing with Snapping Gnarlid and Oran Reef Invoker. Filling out your 2-drop slot is perfect when you've got lots of support creatures to follow up. Tajiru Warcaller, again, one of those cards we mentioned that's a premium green card that now that green is a little bit stronger overall, you're really happy to see that in pack 3. And Grove Tender Druids, the signpost uncommon from Battle for Zendikar, always welcome here.
All right, great stuff. Ian, thanks so much. We've rattled our way through the 5 ally pairs. Tomorrow we'll do it all again with the second set of 5 color pairs for you. All right, now that's it for the Magic Online Draft Archetypes.